So this week on the Vinyl Guide, we've been talking all about Iron Maiden and the Soundhouse tapes, the very, very important link between the band in terms of them being a beloved club band to them recording their first album and becoming the act that they are today. And it wouldn't have happened without the Soundhouse tapes. And today we are very fortunate to have Doug Sampson on the line, who was the drummer, the first drummer with Iron Maiden, and the guy who is beating the skins on the Soundhouse tapes. Doug, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, cheers.
So before we start talking about the Soundhouse tapes and some of the projects you've been involved since, why don't you take us back? Tell us a little bit about the early days. How did you become involved with Iron Maiden?
Well, I've been friends with Steve. I met him when I was with Smiler. He was the bass player for the band then. And when we left Smiler, Steve wanted to go off and form his own band. He asked me if I was interested. At the time, I'd had enough of the gigging and the rehearsing. So I said, no, it won't be. It's not really something I really want to do at the moment. So he went off and he formed Iron Maiden. He had a lineup, and he had many different lineups. And he decided that it wasn't really the lineup that he wanted. So he done a gig at the Bridge House, and it wasn't particularly brilliant. And I was in the audience at the time. And he said to me after the gig, look, I'm thinking of collapsing the band and starting again. Would you be interested in coming back? Come and join us. I said, yeah, let's go for it. So that's what really happened.
You were involved in, I guess, he was doing a rethink of the band. He wanted to wipe the slate clean. And you guys had a history. So he said, Doug, you're a known quantity. And you guys got along. So you were the first person that he reached out to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's when I said, yeah, let's go for it. So he said, well, start rehearsing next week. But at the time, there was only three of them. It was just me, myself, and Dave. So we just went in the studio, like the rehearsal rooms, and that's where we started, just the three of us.
And that was early 1978?
Yes, that would be about 78 time, yes.
So there was the three of you. When did Paul come into play? Or were there any other singers involved before Paul?
I don't remember any other singers at the time. Me and Steve went down to a place called the Red Lion in Leytonstone High Road. They had a Radio Caroline road show. And I was standing at the bar, I was chatting to someone, and he said, how's the band going? I said, well, we're looking for a singer at the moment. And he said, a mate of mine's a singer. I'll have a word with him. I said, well, we're rehearsing down studio tomorrow. That was on Sunday. I said, well, drag him down. So he said, yeah. So on the Sunday, this chap brought this bloke down, Paul Diano. And he walked in, he sort of swaggered in. And I don't know what songs we'd done, but anyway, it was a couple of Deep Purple songs or whatever. And he picked up the mic and started singing. And we just knew he was the bloke for the job, from that minute on. Yeah.
And at that point, were you guys doing originals or covers or a mix of both?
No, it was all our own stuff at that time. I don't remember doing any covers at that point. It was all our own stuff.
How many songs did you guys have before you started gigging?
Well, it would be all the first album. I don't know if they left anything off. I can't remember it. I can't exactly remember how many songs. It'd be filled out about an hour and a half, 2 45-minute sets.
How long was it from the time when you started rehearsing and you found Paul to when you started playing gigs?
I think I started with them about this time, Easter time, maybe a bit earlier, and we started gigging in the following year. So it would have been like the first gig was just after Christmas, after we'd done the Soundhouse tapes. So, yeah, it was about 6 months of solid rehearsing, definitely. It was good few months rehearsing.
So you guys weren't playing gigs necessarily up to the point of the Soundhouse tapes. The Soundhouse tapes came before the gigs.
I think if I remember rightly, the Soundhouse tapes came first, because we went to Cambridge to do the Soundhouse tapes. Yeah, and then afterwards, that's when we started gigging, yeah.
How long was it between when you recorded the Soundhouse tapes, which is, I think, December 30th and December 31st, around New Year's Eve, to when the tape famously got to Neil Kay and started getting the band some publicity?
Well, it all happened very quickly, to be honest. We were just doing gigs, I think, down to Ruskin at that point, and Steve had gone up the bandwagon and gave Neil Kay a copy of the Soundhouse tapes, which was in a cassette format at the time, just to get a gig, and he was just blown away with it. So he was asked by Sounds to do a chart, a heavy metal chart each week from requests down the bandwagon, which was he was DJ at the club there, and they were just getting so many requests. It was going up and up and up, and it eventually went to number one. I'm not sure which track that was. I think it was Prowler. And then it happened that about 2 or 3 of the tracks all were in the charts, and they were overtaking like real big established bands, you know, Rush and bands like that. And so it drew people's attention to it, you know.
Yeah, I saw a copy of one of the charts that showed Iron Maiden demo tape, and it was above bands like Black Sabbath and Ted
that's
Nugent.
right.
It's pretty incredible. So all that happened fairly quick, and on the strength of that, that's when the gigs started coming.
That's right. Yeah. We were still doing the Ruskin every, I think it was Friday or Saturday, for the local fans. But then it started to take off, and we were starting to travel far and wide. You know, started to go up and down the country. When Rod came in, he started to get more and more gigs.
So on the strength of the Soundhouse recording, on the tapes that Neil was playing, the band started hitting the charts. You got proper management with Ron Smallwood, and everything. It started becoming a full-time job being in Iron Maiden.
Yes, yeah. It ceased to be a hobby, and it became a main way of life. Yeah, definitely.
How did everybody adjust to that change?
Oh, fairly well, I think. You know, it was what everybody was after. So I didn't see any changes in anyone. It just sort of progressed, and we all just got on with it, really, you know.
Was there a point when you guys just started quitting your day jobs and focusing in on the band?
Yeah. I was probably the last, because I had a good governor, and he just let me have as much time as I wanted. But in the end, I had to be fair to them and say, look, I can't do this. I'm going to have to leave, because the gigs are getting more and more frequent, sort of thing, you know, and we're traveling further and further afield.
So you recorded the Soundhouse tapes as a 4-piece, with Davey doing all the guitar tracks. At what point did Tony Parsons come into the picture?
Yeah, after we'd done the Soundhouse tapes, we were looking for another guitarist, and we had some auditions, and a chap called Tony Parsons came along, and he just slotted in really well. So that was it. He slotted in, and off we went with Tony for a period. Yeah, he was a good guitarist, nice bloke.
As the story goes, the Soundhouse tapes were recorded over the course of 2 days, and with the intention of the band going back a week or two later to purchase the multi-track tapes and perhaps doing some additional recordings.
Yes. Yeah.
What were the recordings that you guys were planning to do during 2 weeks after the main sessions? I
think what we planned to do was put another guitarist in, if I remember rightly. I don't think we was actually going to add any more to it, apart from just putting another guitarist in. I can't honestly remember. I know that all I do remember is Steve coming back saying they've wiped the tapes, so we can't do that. What it was, I do not remember quite clearly. So what we had was what, you know, that was it. That was set in stone. There was nothing more we could do with it.
So it was more or less a rough mix that you guys had, and that was all you had to work with.
Yeah, I mean, we put them down. We all got a copy of the actual cassette from the studio. I mean, I've still got mine now, and that was it. You know, as I say, I think Steve wanted to do something else to it, maybe clean it up a bit. I'm not actually sure, but when he came back, he said, "Well, there's nothing we can do now. They've wiped the tapes." Because they were on big tapes in them days, you know.
Those were pretty expensive. That was a pretty common studio practice. So,
yeah.
Now it seems that Steve Harris and Dave Murray, just being familiar with them over the course of decades and from afar, they seem like very mellow individuals, very even keeled. But Paul Di'Anno strikes us as a bit unpredictable. Are we reading that correctly?
Yeah, I would say so. That's quite accurate, really. He's a bit of a complex character. I think he'd admit that himself, really. That's a fair way of describing Paul, really. He's a bit of a lovable rogue, but can be a bit unpredictable. Yeah, definitely.
So in those early days, was Paul good to his voice? I mean, would his voice hold out gig after gig after gig, or were there any challenges with that?
With the period that I was with the band, I don't think there was too many problems. I think he possibly liked a drink and a smoke more than he should have done, but on the whole, he wasn't too bad. You know, I think what I can make of it, the problems really kicked in after I'd left. I think that's when the American tours and stuff, I think that's when their problems started with Paul. But I don't particularly remember any occasions where he let himself down or anything at that in the early days, you know. But as I say, I think it all happened after I'd gone.
You eventually left Iron Maiden. What was the reasoning or the discussion behind that?
Well, at the time, my health wasn't holding up to the touring and that. I wasn't. I sort of came down with a flu kind of virus, and I couldn't shift it. I just kept coming down with it, and I felt like I had flu basically all the time, and it was really, really affecting me. And I just realised that life on the road at that point in my life wasn't really agreeing with me.
Sleeping in the back of the Green Goddess.
Yeah, freezing cold ice on inside the windows and that, and I don't think it was particularly good for my health. So we went up to Christmas, and I said to Steve, you know, we had a meeting, and I said, I think it's best if I go now, because I don't want to end up killing myself. So reluctantly, you know, I left at that point. That was just before Christmas, 78, 79. I can't remember exactly.
I think that would have been 79. Now, the Soundhouse tapes came out in record format in early November. What were the conversations like in the band about pressing these demos that you recorded the previous year and putting them out on record? What was the band discussion around that?
I think the idea was to just sell them at gigs to the fans that had been there from the beginning as a present, more of a present. That's why we didn't press more than, I think it was about 5,000. Yeah, that was what it was. It was so it would end up as a collector's piece for the people that had supported the band from the early days, really. Because Rod has often said that if he'd put that out, like through EMI, it would have cleared up a lot of money problems he had at the time. He said, but he just refused to do it because he wanted it as a special gift to the fans, you know.
So a single press of 5,000 went out. It was distributed. Yeah. It was distributed through the fan club, or what means?
Yeah, it went through the fan club and selling them on a pasteboards at gigs, basically. You know, it was simple as that.
Now, the timing of the Soundhouse tapes and the timing of when the band was signed to EMI is all within a few weeks. Was it a deliberate decision to have the Soundhouse tapes come out before the band signed to EMI?
I couldn't tell you if that was a deliberate decision or not. Just the way I remembered it happened. That was really something I really don't know if they actually sat down and thought about that. No, I couldn't answer that honestly. I'm really not sure about that one.
When you listen to the Soundhouse tapes now, what is your overarching feeling? What is your emotion when you hear the Soundhouse tapes all these years later?
Oh, it's brilliant. I still enjoy listening to it even now. You know, I still remember. It still brings back so many memories. It's as if it only happened last week, because it's. I remember standing in the studio when they'd done all the mixing and just played it back. I just couldn't believe it. You know, it's my first ever experience in the studio and my first ever recording. So it was something I was quite proud of and still am, really.
And you still have a copy of the Soundhouse tapes for yourself?
Yes, I've still got one, yes. Got it sitting next to me now.
The 4 tracks that were recorded in Cambridge over those 2 days were Iron Maiden, Prowler, Invasion, and Strange World, which was a song that didn't make it to the actual record pressing. It's on the demo tapes, but it didn't make it to the actual record pressing. Which one of those songs was the band most proud of?
I'm not really sure of that. I mean, the Prowler seemed to be very, very popular around the clubs and that. So that was one of them. But no, I think they all seem to go down really well. I'm not sure about what one was a favourite or not. I think they all sort of came out quite equal. really, in that sort of respect.
Was there one they were pushing more than others to Neil Kay or?
No, not to my knowledge. I think they just sort of gave them all the equal coverage. Like, I don't think any one of them was particularly pushed further than any of the others.
Now, when the Soundhouse records initially came out, 5,000 copies of the record were pressed, but I believe at some point there was a shortage of the sleeves. Do you remember anything about that?
Yes, yeah, because I didn't get my sleeve till well after I'd left, to be honest, and that is a fact because I had a few copies. I had maybe about 3 or 4 copies that have all gone because I've given them to the family and whatever, and they've got lost. And I didn't. And then I think it was some period after I spoke to Steve. Steve, have you got any covers? I've got my Soundhouse tapes, but I haven't even seen a cover. And that's when I think, give me enough to cover all my singles, like, yeah. Okay. But I don't know what the problem was, or I can't remember. But I know we were selling them without the covers to start with, and they had to send a slip or something in to get their cover at a later date.
Yeah, the records were shipped with a piece of paper promising a cover coming soon.
Right.
And there are some collectors out there who not only collect copies of the Soundhouse tapes themselves, but also the covers and the different forms of paper that accompany them.
I don't know. I didn't know that.
There's a few you may recall. I may jog your memory on some of these. There's the slip of paper that was shipped when the record was sent without the cover, promising the cover to be sent at a date in the future. There was also a slip of paper that I believe went out with the majority of the Soundhouse tapes that where people could order a T-shirt or a badge from an address in London.
Yeah.
Do you know if those flyers were slipped in with every Soundhouse tapes, or was that just kind of a limited run?
Couldn't tell you. I didn't even know they existed, to be honest. I knew that they had to send something back, but I'd never actually seen one, so I don't remember that.
I'll send you some pictures if you want to check them out.
Yeah.
And of course, people still remember you from being on the Soundhouse tapes. Do you see many of the Soundhouse tapes coming through? Are you still signing them?
Yeah. When I do, if I go to any function where the people know that I'm going to be at, they do come along with their Soundhouse tapes. As I say, I'll see many formats, and there's still a good few originals out there, but there's a hell of a lot of iffy ones that are pretending to be the right ones.
Can you tell a fake? Can you spot a fake?
Yes. I mean, the most easiest way is that the folds on the cover are on the left and right hand side, and the record goes in the top of the sleeve. A lot of them have where the record goes in the side of the sleeve. That is not an original. So the record has to go through the top of the sleeve, and the folds are at either side.
The telltale sign. And when you see somebody come in with a fake Soundhouse tapes, do you break their heart, or do you just move on as if?
I don't say anything. No. I had one chap say, I've just got myself a Soundhouse tape, so I think it's an original, and I didn't really comment. I didn't want to upset him too much,
Do you know much about the process that went through to press the record? Were you involved in that? Actually getting the test pressings and whatnot?
No. 1 minute they weren't there, and the next minute they were there. I don't remember any of the process of that. I think it was something that Rod had sorted out. I remember Steve making the cover. I went round Rod's place. He had a place in Kensington, and I remember Steve sitting at a kitchen table with a ruler and a pen, and he was doing the artwork. I can remember that. All the band was around there just drinking coffee and hanging out, while Steve was sitting at the kitchen table designing the cover.
Now, that's Steve's handwriting on the back of the cover and on the record label itself, yeah?
Yeah.
And he also, around that time, made the Iron Maiden logo itself, which is iconic and one of the best brands in rock and roll to this day. What do you recall about the creation of the Iron Maiden logo?
Well, that was from a very early stage. That was really when he was playing down the cart and horses long before I joined. I saw it, it just appeared, and I don't know who actually designed it, whether it was Steve or I think it was Steve, but it's like an old English writing, isn't it? And I don't honestly know. It just seemed to be there all the time. It's not, it's quite distinctive.
Yeah, you don't remember a world without it.
Not really, no. No, it's funny enough, I don't. Yeah, posters outside the cart and horses are all had it on, and I just sort of took it for granted. That was it. Yeah, it's very strange. It's only when you start thinking about these things that you realise, I thought it was always there, but yeah.
And who coined the term Eddie?
I think that came about after I'd left. I'm not sure that he was referred to Eddie when I was actually with them. I think that might have been after I'd left, when they got the actual logo on the picture of Eddie on the first album. I think that's where he got his name from.
On the backlights, the thing that used to leak blood out of its mouth, I thought that was originally Eddie the Head.
It possibly, yeah, it does ring a bell, because it's something that Dave Lights might have said. Yeah, it's possibly something that he might have come up with, that's Eddie the Head. Yeah. Now you've said it like that. Yeah.
You could tell. You could tell I was very obsessed with Iron Maiden for many, many years. Yeah. If I went back in time right now and I told my 16-year-old self that I was talking to you right now, he'd jump out a window or faint. So when you guys were playing live, are there any songs that you guys had that have never been recorded and have never shown up anywhere else?
No, I was thinking about that. I think someone asked me that, and I can't remember. I think everything that was recorded, which we played, actually ended up somewhere.
There's no outtakes, or there's no songs that are somewhere on.
I can't to remember. No, I mean, everything seems to have been used somewhere down the line. I mean, I've done a couple of songs for the Metal for Mothers album, and I actually came across one or two of them on a B-side of a single back 10, 15 years. So I think everything sort of gets used somewhere down the line. So no, I can't honestly think there was anything that actually never made it. I think everything got used.
Very efficient.
Even if it got slightly changed, even if they changed it, but it did get used. Yeah.
Right. Now, the track that was on the Metal for Mothers record, the EMI New Wave of British Heavy Metal compilation, was that from the Soundhouse tapes, or was that from a different recording session?
Oh, that was definitely that was a different recording session. Went to a proper, I think it was EMI actually, a proper studio to do that.
And you must have a few good road tales about what it was like playing those early shows with Iron Maiden. Can you share one or two of them with us?
The main one was definitely the blood machine that we had. That was it was always put over the back of the drum rostrum, hanging on the wall on a wall. And in the middle of Iron Maiden, in the break, all these lights around a mask would come on. All 100-watt lights would all come on, and the mask would spit blood out. And every night, this thing would spit blood all over my head, and I was covered in this. And it was basically food dye that Dave Lights had mixed up and put into this machine. It was spat out through a windscreen wiper pump, and it used to come and cover me. This happened on a nightly basis, so that was quite a good memory I've got of that.
You guys had quite sophisticated theatrics for those early gigs. Were any other bands doing kind of what you guys were doing with the fog machines and the blood and the signs and the logos?
I don't remember anybody else doing it. We had a chap called Dave Lights, and it was his speciality. He was coming up with ideas the whole time. He was one of Steve's early friends, and he'd turn up to and say, "Oh, I've just invented this and that." He was a genius for coming up with different ideas. Everything in the early days came from him. Really, had some really good ideas.
So the blood coming out of the sign that was above the drummer, I guess it initially started out as a bit of an accident that you were getting in the middle of it, but I imagine after a while it became part of the routine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I've still got drum skins in my loft that are absolutely smothered in these. I can't bring myself to get rid of them. I never use them, but they're absolutely smothered. They actually look just completely red, where they've night after night having this blood spilt all over them. So yeah, I've still got it on my drum store, and I've still got the original Heyman that I used. I sometimes take to charity events and show. And that's still covered in it, and I've never cleaned that off.
That's great. So you still have the same drum kit. You pull it out every so often. What kind of and what sort of activities you've been involved with post Iron Maiden?
Well, I've played in a few bands that since the Maiden days, but my first project really was with Air Force. When after a year or so, I formed a band with a friend of mine, and that was Air Force. My brother then joined on vocals, and I was doing that for a good few years, doing the clubs and pubs around London and that.
And you're still playing with Air Force, yeah?
Yes, I mean, I did have a break. I had a break from Air Force for a few years, and then the guitarist he reformed it, and just recently, over the last few months, I've rejoined again. So it's it's really good.
Are you doing a lot of gigs right now? Are you?
No. Stage at the moment. We've got an album coming out in a few months' time by Watch Out Records, and it's a catalogue of the stuff we've done in the early days, right up to some new tracks that we're putting down now. So it crosses all the years, sort of thing, since we first started. So it should be good.
And the same sort of music, heavy metal. It's still your passion.
Yeah, I mean that is my passion, but the early tracks are a little bit more commercial. When my brother Sam was singing, and then it has definitely progressed and changed. I wouldn't say it was Maiden style at all. It was more like a soft rock, and then it's more progressed into like more of a rock sound now. So it has changed over the years, definitely.
Recently, you played on a compilation album, The Origins of Iron.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that track is called War Games, and it was lifted from the sessions, our first recording session with Air Force, with my brother Sam on vocals. They said, could we submit a track that would go onto this Origins of Iron, and there was only one track to go on there as far as we were concerned, and that was War Games. It's totally nothing like it really, anything else really. It's just a one-off. We really love the song. I mean, and we definitely wanted to put that out to show that there was a different side, give a different edge to the album, because I knew there'd be a lot of rock sounds there. So I thought, well, we'll put that on, and it'll be a bit of a contrast to the rest of the material that's probably going to go on the album. And and it was really, yeah.
If Air Force starts to pick up and you start doing gigs, will you find yourself freezing in the back of a green truck somewhere in the UK?
I hope I don't. I mean, it would be great for nostalgia, but I don't think I really want to do it after all these years. No, we'll try and be a little bit more sensible now, I think. Yeah.
And do you keep in touch with Steve and the boys, or any other Paul and those guys?
I haven't spoken to Paul for years. I don't know where he is, and I do normally keep in touch with Steve, even though he's moved out of the country now. But he used to live not so far from me, and we'd pop round there from time to time to see him. But I haven't seen him for a while. I think last year I popped round to see him when he was in this country, because I just bought a new drum kit and I needed somewhere to tune it up, and he said, "I'll bring it round here." And I went round to one of his place that I think his family uses. He doesn't live there anymore, and that was the last time I saw him. I think it was about last May or so. So I haven't seen him for a while.
Yeah. He strikes me as the type of guy who is still a good bloke and probably hasn't changed too much since the early days.
No, I've not noticed that he's still the same, really. Still the same bloke to me. Yeah, it's just that a little bit better known. He's still the same bloke.
Well, he had an incredible vision, and he seems from the early days he was very focused. He documented a lot of things. It was very. It seems to be very clear that he saw it as a business and as a process to put together, to do the gigs, to build up the fan base, and to achieve. I get the impression he's not that surprised to be where he's at today.
No, probably not. I mean, whereas I think he took it very seriously from day one. Mm-hmm. He wasn't the sort of bloke that would end up getting drunk in the bar. He'd go to bed reasonably early and look after himself and just document everything. And I think you're possibly right there that he did foresee that this. I mean, we all foresee that it was going to be quite big, but how big, no one really knew. So. Yeah, I think he possibly had a vision that it would be quite successful. I remember once I was down a pub in Walthamstow watching. I was with Steve watching Paul Di'Anno's band. I think it was called Battle Zone, and they played a Maiden song. And I said to Steve, "How's it feel listening to this?" He said, "I never expected it to be this big." He just came out with it. So I knew it be successful, but I really didn't think it would get this big. So that was an insight on that.
Yeah, it seems he just always took it seriously. I imagine you guys were practicing 5 and 6 days a week.
Yes, yeah. We were doing quite a lot of rehearsing to get it as tight as possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was in the studio and I could tell something was gonna happen because it was getting so tight and everything was sounding so good. And I remember Dave saying to me one day, "Well, if this band don't make it, nothing will." And I always stuck in my mind that did. Because he was a very quiet bloke, Dave. He never used to say a great deal, really. But I do remember that. Profound words.
Yeah. And what is your favorite memory when you think about your time with Iron Maiden and the history with it? What is the one moment you always go back to remember how good it is?
We've done I think it was a gig down a Music Machine. I'm not sure. We've done a few down a Music Machine, but there was one gig that we'd done with Sampson. Yeah, I think Sampson Redline, and that always springs to mind, that gig, because it people still talk about it now. They say it's the night that new wave of British heavy metal was born. But
that was on the bill with Angel Witch and Sampson.
Yeah, we had a cover in Sounds. There was a rock magazine back in the day, and it seemed to change everything. Really, seemed to that one gig. But I mean, I did enjoy all of it. But I do remember that because I've got, I think it's a copy of a Mojo magazine, and it's got all pictures of that night, and and the headline is "The Night New Wave of British Heavy Metal was born." And I thought, oh, that's really strange, because we just thought, well, it'd be just another gig, and it seemed to have gone down in history, really. Yeah.
Did you know it was important at the time?
Not really, no. I funny enough, I met up with Thunderstick, the drummer with Sampson with Mars, at a legacy project I was doing a couple of months ago, where I took my kit along, and we'd done it for charity. We'd done it for Clive Burr Foundation. And I was talking to him about it, and I said, "Do you remember that gig?" I said, "Did you think it was going to be anything different?" He said, "No, I just thought it was going to be another gig, a good gig, and that was it." I said, "It seems to have gone down in history, that one." We were both quite amazed about it.
Doug, thank you very much for spending the time talking with us. It really is quite fascinating, and hearing the history of Iron Maiden, a band that so many people, including myself, absolutely love. From a very young teenager, I had all the records, and they still do something for us, particularly the folks in the vinyl community who have these records. There's something about having hearing the music on a record as opposed to a CD or other digital formats that really kind of brings out an energy, which I think is what you and Steve and everyone intended to happen. And the Soundhouse tapes, again, very pivotal in the history of not only heavy metal, but the history of music. So again, it was great talking with you, and we appreciate you sharing the stories of that time.
Oh, that's fine. It's my pleasure.
Great.
Yeah.